So here we are for the final round. Let's see if we can win. And so, for the person in charge of the Zoom session, I would like to do the prayers of... thank you, Sila. Of course it's you. I would like to do the prayers to Shakyamuni Buddha and the final homage at the end, exactly those 2 pages, because we have lots of things to discuss this evening. I have to find them myself. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arahat, perfectly complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sugata, know of the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans. To you, Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, we prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arahat, perfectly complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct. Sugata, know of the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans. To you, Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, we prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arahat, perfectly complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct. Sugata, know of the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans. To you, Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, we prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides, then said, I am supreme in this world. To your wise then we prostrate. With pure bodies, form supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best Savior, to you we prostrate. With a supreme science face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you we prostrate. Thus free like you the 3 worlds are not, incomparably wise one, to you we prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the Teacher having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you the one gone to dustness we prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path to sublime pure reality, to the Dharma that pacifies we prostrate. Those who are liberated and also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you the sublime community intending virtue we prostrate. Do not commit any unwholesome actions, engage in perfect wholesome actions, subdue one's own mind. This is a teaching of the Buddha. A star, the vector view, a butter-lamp flame, an illusion, a dewdrop, a water bubble, a dream lightening a cloud. See all consider phenomena like this. By these matters may transmigratory beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the enemy of faults, and be freed from the ocean of samsara, disturbed by the ways of aging, sickness, and death. Independent origination, there is no ceasing, no arising, no annihilation, no permanence, no coming, no going, no separateness, and no sameness. We prostrate to the consummate Buddha, the supreme among all teachers, the one who taught this peace, which is freed of elaborations. So maybe you could, as place to start as any, is why do we pay homage to Buddha Shakyamuni in specific? I think it is important on the one hand not to be sectarian. Sectarianism is very popular hobby nowadays, and is always about drawing lines around something else. So to facilitate the exclusion of others and thereby to feel superior. And that is profoundly unethical. On the other hand, it is necessary to define oneself, or to define for oneself why one is pursuing a specific teaching. And so there's much wisdom in the world, and that should not be abandoned, that should not be ignored. But two qualities mark the Buddha as quite special. For one thing, the teachings for the Buddha are for all living beings. Human and non-human, they are for, regardless of nation, of gender, or whatever preference we have, they are regardless of people doing bad deeds or good deeds. At the weekend, we looked at Angulimala, the murderer amongst murderers, and the Buddha turned him into not only an enlightened being, but a patron saint for pregnant women. And that is one of the aspects that makes the Buddha's teachings quite unique. The other aspect is, and that is the topic of this evening, is that the Buddha provides the final antidote towards all illnesses. There's many ethical systems in the world, there's much compassion offered. But the argument of this evening, and thereby of the Buddha and of the great Atiśa, whose text we will be taking a look at, is that all our problems start with an aberration in our perception. There's something about what we see which does not exist at all, and which therefore underlies our anger, our desire, our jealousy, our depression, and so on and so forth. Which is therefore very important for, I would say, two main reasons. On the one hand, that gives us access to, once we understand it, access to a permanent ending of that problem. It also allows us to be profoundly compassionate, because it is no one's fault. That is no one, and that is the Buddha's deep insight, that is no one's deliberate intent to harm. It just looks that way. To the harmer, and we all have, if one is old enough, every one of us has harmed sometimes. Maybe a little more, but we all end up doing that. And when each of us looks back at that moment when we harmed someone else, in that moment that we remember it, there's an appearance to us that of which we understand that it made us believe that doing harm was the right cause or the right pursuit and the right thing to do. And that's very important to understand. Beings are imprisoned by a wrong perception. And that is not of their fault. No one made that deliberately. But it is highly toxic. Yeah. So the main topic of this evening is therefore the wrong appearance that reality has, and its opposite side, the way things exist when we analyze how things abide. But before we get there, it is worth our while to remember the analysis that the Buddha gives in the Four Noble Truths of our struggle. He argues that we have, one could say, three stress factors in our lives. This is one of the great untranslatable words in the Dharma, very unfortunately often translated as suffering, which it doesn't mean. It includes suffering, but it's not the only problem that we have. The word is dukkha, and the word dukkha comes from, the etymology comes from a chariot axle being improperly put into the wheel. So the thing is driving. It is like when you are driving your car and your front wheels are badly aligned. which creates a profoundly unpleasant feeling when you're driving on the highway. It feels as though your front wheels might come off at any given moment. And if one is old enough, young children can sort of bypass that for a while. But the moment your teeth start to hurt or your knees fall apart or you run into all kinds of other problems, you realize that problems are around the corner. And so the Buddha analyzes or diagnoses three types of stress factors. He says the first one is that we will encounter suffering. It is suffering to be born, the suffering to grow old, infirm, and it definitely will be very unpleasant to die. Yeah. And that is an inevitable part of our existence. Yeah. And there is an enormous variety with regard to those aspects. And it is for that reason that another great Indian master, Chandrakirti, says we should definitely practice what he calls practice compassion, observing sentient beings. Yeah. If we want to make a difference in the world, that is one of the places where we should start. And we might not be able to prevent people from getting older. We might work hard to prevent them from getting infirm or healing their infirmities. But there's much physical suffering that we do have a say over. And that is suffering of injustice, of torture, of discrimination, and so on and so forth, hunger and thirst. And we should definitely engage with these things, because to impose on people that they should find a spiritual path when you are living at the moment in northern Sudan, the north part of southern Sudan, and the bombs are coming all around, coming down all around you, then these are empty words. Yeah. They first should find safety and something to eat. But then the Buddha goes one step deeper, and that is highlighted by Chandrakirti when he says we should observe, we should practice or develop or cultivate compassion, observing impermanence. And impermanence goes one step deeper. Here we encounter a first level of ignorance. To our perception, things appear to be stable. And in reality, they are not. All things change from moment to moment. So seeking stability, to seek satisfaction in a world where everything changes from moment to moment is a lost cause and can only lead to dissatisfaction. And that is one way to look at the second form of dukkha, of stress. We endlessly pursue satisfaction in ways where satisfaction can never be obtained. Yeah. No matter how many desired objects we consume, we will always end up empty-handed. And so to cling to things that change for permanent satisfaction is truly a lost cause. Yeah. And that does not only deliver immense, frustration, feelings of not being good enough, and so on and so forth. But when we look around, when we take a look at the world around us, we are on the verge of having consumed our entire planet and not realizing that something along the lines went wrong. If we manage to consume the whole planet and are still not satisfied, maybe there's a problem with our pursuit of satisfaction. And that is the paradox that we are living, that despite the fact that our air is becoming toxic, that forests are disappearing, and so on and so forth, we still believe that if we consume that one thing more, we will become happy. Yeah? And all of these are not our topic of this evening because that would take us way too far. The topic of our evening is the third type of dukkha. And that is I was complaining this weekend that the Buddha should have had a good marketing manager. It is often called the all-pervasive compounded suffering. And that means that our existence in this world is determined by our ignorance. And the problem is not the world, the problem is the way the world appears to us, how we respond to that. and the imprints, the causal conditions that creates for the continuity of our mind. We are living in a mirror hole of our own making without knowing it. That is the topic of this evening. And Chandrakirti's response to that is developing compassion that realizes emptiness. Yeah. To know how things truly exist. And thereby, on the one hand, and that is equally important to say, as we will see this evening, and the realizing how things exist, that's what we add to the world in unfortunate ways the world has always been free of. On the one hand, facilitates compassion because it allows us to see that no living being is bad or imprisoned in and of him or herself. It is simply a matter of causes and conditions. It also facilitates the haver of compassion because it tells us that we interexist with the people we have compassion for. Our care for them is equally important for ourselves. We don't exist independently of them. The suffering of someone else is also our own, and the happiness of someone else is also our own. Makes it personal. And of course, in order to heal sicknesses, we need to know, on the one hand, how the sickness arises, but also we need to know the medicine. And that makes the Buddha unique. As Tsongkhapa says, homage to him who taught dependent origination. All things do not self-exist. All things exist in dependence on parts, on causes and conditions, and on imputation by mind, as we will see this evening. So that gives a short introduction of how this teaching of Atiśa is located. So it is a training for, that one could say, doctors to be. If we want to heal the suffering of the world, then this text is an essential one because it will heal us first. To go with an infectious disease into a ward is a bad idea. And that is often what we end up trying to accomplish. And this weekend I quoted Thich Nhat Hanh, who arrived in the United States, I think, in the actually, someone sent it to me when it exactly was, but I forgot again. I guess 66, 67. He was invited to speak to the United Nations. And on the airport, there was a massive anti-Vietnam demonstration where people were attacking the soldiers returning from war. And he said, it is amazing that people think that they can bring peace without having peace in their hearts, with having anger and violence in their hearts. So on the one hand, Atiśa's text is important because it is the medicine for our own illness, so that when we start to alleviate our own illness, we can bring the medicine to others. So the text seems initially abstract, but I hope you understand that its purpose is profound. So far? Still here? Good, because there's a few things coming your way. Now, some of you are doing a long-term meditation training with me. There's one thing to add here, and at least I've not elaborate too much on things that I should not elaborate on. That there is, so when we talk about Buddhist meditation, on the one hand, one could say, to say the modern terms, we can talk about constructive meditation, where we cultivate wholesome mental qualities, compassion, kindness, generosity, and so on and so forth. Ultimately, bodhicitta, the wish to become a Buddha for the welfare of all living beings. But we also do, and that is what this text is all about, is called deconstructive meditation. So our mind creates like a make-believe, and the fortunate and the most important aspect of our human life is that we actually have a language which allows us to study philosophy, which allows us to question, investigate the appearance to our mind. Can things exist as they appear to me, or can they not? And if the latter is the case, then how do they exist? And that is, according to Buddhist cosmology, both way outside of the purview of the lower realms. the micro puppy. Animals can't do that. Don't keep his ears closed. And hungry ghosts can do that. Hell beings can't do that. But equally, most of the gods and demigods can't do that much either, for different reasons. So we have a human rebirth, but above all, we have a precious human rebirth. We have functioning senses, we have a relatively functioning body, and we have access to a specific form of thought that allow us to question our perception and to find freedom by doing so. Yeah. Now, there's two ways to approach that. And in the meditation training, the one that we're not doing this evening, we will do then. And that is what often is called seeking the view on the basis of meditation, where we first learn to calm the mind, and we achieve first calm abiding, and we train the mind such that it can stay almost unlimitedly on a specific topic. And then we investigate how does the thing that we are observing now, that we are holding with that calm mind, how does it exist? But there's also another way of pursuing this, and this is what this text is all about, that we first seek the view. We use first analysis, we first use philosophy to understand how do things exist. And when we have a good idea, when the notions start to appear to us, this is the way things exist, this is the way they don't exist, then we generate calm abiding on the basis of that view. So Atiśa will describe first the view, and then he will describe how to meditate on that view. Yeah. So both are valid ways, and Atiśa actually wrote text for both pursuits. Atiśa was, of course, a great Indian master, has arrived in Tibet in the 12th century, was incremental, was essential for the transformation of Tibetan Buddhism, on which this entire tradition relies. That is the most quoted master by the great Tsongkhapa, who's undoubtedly sitting somewhere behind me. Does he? Yeah, oh yeah, Tsongkhapa sitting there. Yeah. Tsongkhapa. Yeah. But time is short, and what we have to discuss is a lot. So let's head into the text. I will try to give as much as possible an accessible commentary on this text. In the great monasteries in southern India, for example, this topic is studied for years at an end. So I hope this is a good taster. I would wish that at the end of the evening you feel energized, you feel curious, you would have the sense of like, this makes sense somehow, and I'm enthusiastic about it. I would love to know more. Yeah. If then you want to read more books, I'm the former librarian of my monastery. I can give you as many books as you want. I can give you probably more books than you can read in this lifetime, but one should make an effort. Yeah. So I will read it through to you, which is always a good idea. The oral aspect in Buddhism, in all Buddhist traditions, is very important. So that we keep that by pronouncing the text, even if it is in a different language than it was originally written, it is by speaking that we give life to the text. In the Tibetan tradition, in order to be able to study a text, one usually seeks an oral transmission. One seeks sound. To use the breath as a vehicle to get something from someone else's mind. Yeah. The problem with this text, though, is that there is actually no direct lineage of this anymore. The text, that lineage stopped, but a number of different scholars are doing their best to make this text alive, and I enjoyed learning from them. So the text is called the Madhyamaka Upadesha, the special instructions to the middle way. And many of you may know that the term middle way is throughout the Buddhist tradition a very important term. The Buddha initially uses it to indicate that he pursues a spiritual path somewhere between self-indulgence and asceticism. And he says both are very harmful for the person. On the one hand, self-indulgence just makes one an addict to sensory pleasures, and on the other hand, asceticism undermines the health of one's body and mind. One should protect the body, one should care for the body, but in order to find freedom and not to seek indulgence. But here it means something else. And that is well based in the Pali Sutras even. And as Nagarjuna quotes one of the texts where the Buddha says, I neither, in debate with someone else, I neither accept existence and non-existence. And we will see in a moment why he doesn't accept these two terms. That is here the middle way that he seeks. Because he will argue convincingly, I hold, that what we mean by existence cannot be true. And if we hold that most people that grasp for existence in that incorrect way then are taught that it's not possible, that they fall to the other extreme of non-existence. And so the point we were going to see is that our minds make us believe that things and people exist in and of themselves independently. And the Buddha says that is not possible. And then most other Indian schools and most philosophies in the world then come to the conclusion that things do not exist. And the Buddha says that I do not exist, that I do not accept either. That it both leads to dualisms. And non-duality is an important term in this tradition. Yeah. The text was probably written, by the way, in Sanskrit, but we have no Sanskrit version anymore. We only have the Tibetan version as far as I know. And so Atiśa in this text starts with an opening. Sila, do you have the text? And maybe you can conjure it up on the screen. Yes, here we are. Because then everyone can read with me, because I will read the whole thing. And if I put on my glasses, this is much, much easier. So he opens, so the first line, I bow down to the protector of the world, had the homage by the translator. Yeah. And usually these texts, when they were translated, and then we will see towards the end, they are every this text was originally written in Sanskrit, and someone translated in Tibetan. And what you then get is that the translator puts an homage before and a dedication afterwards. And then you get often commentaries that do then the same thing again. And so you get ever more elaborate homages to the Buddha and to his teachings. And that is what is happening here. But Atiśa himself says the following: I bow down to the supreme holy person whose light rays of speech opens the lotuses of the heart of all the deluded like me without exception. And that is a paraphrasing of what I have just said. Interesting here is when we talk here about the word holy, this plays a major, there's a lot of debates in the Buddha's teachings on who is not and who is holy. At the time of the Buddha, the caste system was already coming into existence by way people were said to be superior to other people on the basis of a religious text, in which it was stated that some people were created by Brahman from his mouth, and therefore they were superior. Other ones were created from his hands, and so on and so forth, all the way down to people that are just perform menial activities in the world. And so there was a priest caste, Brahmin priest caste, that claimed to be superior to everyone else because they were the shepherds of the holy text, and so on and so forth. And the Buddha takes that word away. The Buddha takes even the word Brahmin away from them, the famous word Arya away from them. And he says, the only person that is superior or holy is the person that has purified his mind such that unethical conduct is no longer possible, and only good deeds are henceforth done. We should analyze people by way of their view and by way of their action, not by way of their status. And so the Buddha is not holy in and of himself. The Buddha is said to be holy because he purified his mind and thereby liberated all the qualities that a person might have. And the Buddha was truly a caretaker of all living beings and not just some. Yeah. And so he says that the Buddha's main form of generosity, and this weekend we saw there are many of them, but Buddha's main form of generosity was his speech. And we often say there are different forms of generosity, the generosity of protection, the generosity of sharing of one's wealth, one's resources, but of more importantly than that is the generosity of the Dharma, to develop insight, liberating insight, and then to share that liberating insight with others. And so he pays homage especially to that compassionate action that the Buddha did, that after he found enlightenment, he actually taught for 45 years at an end. Yeah. Why is that speech important? Because he says it opens the lotuses of the heart. The lotus is used as a symbol for the Buddha. So on the one hand, it says we all have lotus buds in a way within us. We are Buddhas to be, we just don't know yet. And so the Buddha causes them by way of his speech for that lotus to open so that we become like the lotus. And what is special about the lotus? That on the one hand, lotuses ripen from mud. No, they do not descend from heaven or whatever. They happen in the world. And the great bodhisattvas of old and of today work and practice in this world. They grow from this world. But once they ascend from that world, and what is characteristic about lotus leaves is that nothing sticks to them. So Buddhas, the ones that find awakening, can act in the world without the afflictions of this world sticking to these individuals. And so he does that. He opens the hearts of all that are deluded like me. And that is very common in the Tibetan Indian tradition. You start with stating that you know nothing, but for your own benefit, you wrote a text and then you hope that someone else may enjoy it as well. And these statements of humility I find absolutely brilliant. So far, that is, yeah. If there are questions, let me know, because otherwise I will just run on. And so he continues. Magic. The special instructions of the Mahayana's middle way are as follows. Conventionally, all things from the perspective of the deluded, whose vision is narrow, including all presentations of cause and effect and so forth, are real according to how they appear. Ultimately, or actually, when the conventional as it appears is closely examined and clarified by the great reasonings, one should thoroughly understand with certainty that even something the size of the tip of a hair that is split 100 times cannot be grasped. Yeah. So that is the great opening move. And he starts with the end point. That is where we are trying to go. Yeah. So here he highlights two forms of knowing, one could say. Yeah. And that is a conventional way of knowing and an ultimate way of knowing. Yeah. And both are, one is completely valid, and the other one, in our case, presents us with problems, but is not completely invalid. What do I mean by that? So the example, just to remind you or tell it to you for the first time, the example that I used last week is based on a famous one, had a chariot, but we don't ride chariots anymore. At least I did not see any, although you have a horse, so maybe you have a chariot. No, okay. Then let's keep it to cars. Yeah. And so the analogy is as follows. So conventionally, there is a car. Now, Atiśa is not going to deny that, equally as the Buddha did not deny that. Yeah. A car, what is a car? A car is that thing which can drive me from A to B. And I just came here by car, and so I tested this notion, and I found it to be conventionally true. I managed to get from Deirdre's house all the way to the center by car. So that is very important to keep in mind. So the car exists. But What Atiśa is going to argue is, despite the fact that the car exists, the way the car appears to me is problematic. It actually does not appear to me as it exists. It appears to me to exist in a way that is quite opposite of the way it really exists. So to go through it is shortly. What do you always makes for a funny story. I taught for a while in Monaco, and you can imagine what Monaco is. Too many rich people on one big heap with all kinds of people living around them to serve them. And that's basically what it is. And in the middle of that was a Buddhist monk hanging around, teaching them emptiness. Yeah, that is. So that's the best form of revenge, one could say. So that was a time that I was still running in the morning. And so I was actually staying with an Anglican priest in his house, a great friend of mine who passed away a few years ago. But I always enjoy just running on the beach. You know, you can run to France or to Italy. That's pretty awesome. Or you can, if I was feeling really happy with myself, I would run first to Italy, and then I would turn around and run all the way to France. That's the only place where you can do that. But the funny thing was, I would descend. It's like it's on a slope. And so I would descend down towards the beach, and then I would get onto the beach by descending between the Rolls-Royce shop and the Ferrari shop. And what you see is fancy things with price cards that are way out of my league. Yeah. They promised me actually that they would get me to ride in a red Ferrari. I'm still waiting. And I think we shall leave it because I think there's not enough space in Ferraris to put me in. Yeah. I once got a ride from a very expensive BMW, and I spent 5 hours growing in neck pain. Yeah. But anyway, why would you pay $500,000 for a car? If you would buy the Rolls Royce in the shop to the left and I bring you the parts, you would be deeply unhappy with me because what I would bring to you is nothing that you desire. When you pay me €500,000 and I dump a cylinder in your hallway and I say, well, we'll bring the carburetor next week, you will not be happy with me. There's something in our communication going wrong. The funny thing, of course, is that with everything that I bring to your house, you will still not be happy. Even if I brought the final thing, the carpet underneath your gas pedal to your house, you're still not happy. How is that possible? And so we pay enormous amounts of money for something that when I give it to you in parts, it makes you not happy. So what is going wrong? What is going wrong is that the Rolls-Royce seems to self-exist. There seems to be a Rolls-Royce there that shows its elevated characteristics, its desirable characteristics to me in and of itself without relying on something that is not Rolls-Royce. That make sense? I see something findable. To my awareness, it seems like I can go into the shop and I can find a Rolls-Royce in and of itself. The Buddha says, well, then you should consider. And now you have a hallway full of parts. Start to figure out for yourself which of the part is the Rolls-Royce. And so every time you have a part and you think this part is not the Rolls-Royce, you put it outside. And you can start with the tires, not Rolls-Royce. And you get the cylinders, all 12 of them, or whatever, how many there are in there. And these are not Rolls-Royce. And the windshield, not Rolls-Royce. And the little statue in front, even that is not the Rolls-Royce. And so by the time you have brought all things outside that are not Rolls-Royce, what do you end up with? Nothing. Nothing at all. And so the Rolls-Royce seems to self-exist in your awareness. There is a Rolls-Royce there, but when you analyze a Rolls-Royce, you find parts. And none of the parts are Rolls-Royce. None of the parts can drive you from A to B, and none of the parts are attractive. For none of the parts, and even the random collection of the parts, you would pay the same $500,000. You might get a garbage collector to take them out, but you would not pay for it. And so here we see already there is a tension between the way the Rolls-Royce appears to us and the way the Rolls-Royce exists. Yeah. As the Madhyamikas will say, in the basis that we call Rolls-Royce, in this case, at the car Rolls-Royce, there is no Rolls-Royce to be found, only parts. So when conventionally, in this case, on the basis we impute car, but when we look for the car among the bases, we only find parts, we find no Rolls-Royce at all. So Rolls-Royces exist, but in dependence on parts that are not Rolls-Royce at all. But then, no, Rolls-Royce is a car, and cars can drive you from A to B. I had to do with a Toyota, but that's beside the point. Very nice Toyota that refuses to let me by the way, so I do have my complaints. But when you then look a little bit deeper than that, and you would consider a world in which there would be no gasoline or electricity, or a world where there would not be metal, or a world where there is no designers or factory workers and so on and so forth, would you have a Rolls-Royce? And the answer again is no. So on the one hand, the Rolls-Royce is dependent on parts that are not Rolls-Royce, but at the same time, the Rolls-Royce is also dependent on causes and condition. Someone designed it. Someone built a factory for it. People turn up to make the various parts and stick them together. Someone produces gasoline or batteries and so on and so forth. And so without causes and conditions, and Rolls-Royce is not happening either. And then finally, and that is the deepest of by far the deepest of the three, and our evening together will be way too short to see all the aspects of it. But finally, one can imagine that I read yesterday there are still 200 undiscovered or uncontacted peoples in this world, most of them in the Amazon. Imagine how you are one of these crazy YouTubers that think that they should bring the truth to some unfortunate Indian population that really doesn't want to talk to you in the Amazon, and you bring them a Rolls-Royce as a gift. It's a bit of a carry around, but you take your little canoe, you stick your Rolls-Royce on the back, and you give them the thing. And the question is, what do they see? And you will find very quickly that they don't see a Rolls-Royce. They don't have the concept of a Rolls-Royce. They don't even have the concept of a car. What they see is just a whole heap of metal junk with which you can do very little apart from taking it apart and making maybe arrowheads out of the metal, or using the hood to hammer it into a pot. That is the only thing that they see. But they see no car at all because they have no concept of car. So the car exists in dependence on parts, on dependence of causes and conditions, and a dependence on a group of people that have as a convention, has a communal understanding that this is the car. And otherwise, independent of these three circles, the car doesn't exist at all. Does it make sense? Yeah. That is the shortest introduction to Madhyamaka I could possibly give. And so, again, he says, when we therefore analyze conventionally, and that means that when I investigate between us, and then I find that it is a car. And when I point to Nina's car and I say, is it a car? You all say, yes, that is a car. So we are validated by our community. For our community, this is a car. We agree, and I can call it a car. And it's fine. And so conventionally, there is obviously a car, and later on today, we will use that car to drive from A to B because that constellation of parts and causes and conditions and our understanding, in this case of Nina, how to use it, make it into a car and we can drive back home. But again, to my consciousness, the car seems to self-exist. So if I analyze what they call ultimate reasoning or an ultimate cognizing, when I start to investigate, how does the car exist? Can I find the car's essence, the car's soul, the car's Atman, as they would call it in ancient India, the car's Swabhava, to throw another Sanskrit word in and thereby sound intelligent. Yeah. Then the answer is, I don't find anything. When I analyze the car, I find only things that are not car. So even though the car appears to me to self-exist, when I find it, I find nothing self-existing at all. And to say it in a beautiful way, what we see is intrinsic existence. What we find is extrinsic existence. What we see is in Rolls-Royce essence. What we find is only relations. It is empty of that essence. There's no Rolls-Royce-ness there. Yeah. And that is what emptiness is. So emptiness is not nothingness. So when the Buddha says, I don't accept existence nor non-existence, he navigates between these two knowers. So these two things are true of all phenomena. But he says existence, that is the way the car appears to me. The car appears to me self-existing. There is Rolls-Royce essence there, or there's a soul, there's Gendun here, and so on and so forth. And the Buddha says that I don't accept. That makes no sense. But then I could come to the conclusion, well, this is, so in reality, there's no Rolls-Royce at all. The Buddha says that I don't exist either, because conventionally there is a car, and later on we will actually drive it. That is the middle way of the Madhyamakas. Okay? Yeah. It's quite easy to explain. It's not easy to understand. It's more difficult to realize. Yeah. So then let's see, now that you're already almost enlightened, we can just use the rest as a bit of commentary. Yeah. And so he starts to describe, in fact, a session. Yeah. We will see, by the way, where the tip of a hair goes to. I did not explain that, but Atiśa is going to do that for us. He says, while sitting in a cross-legged position on a comfortable seat, contemplate for a while as follows. There are two kinds of entities, material and non-material. This division is a bit complex, but to make it, to give it a bit of a shortcut explanation for this evening, one could say this is mind and objects of mind. Or mind and matter, although the idea of matter is much broader in Buddhism than it is in the West. So it includes energy and so on and so forth, color and form. Yeah. There is also a little bit more than I just explained in the non-material, but I don't want to bother you with that, because then we make things more complicated than we can get away with in 40 minutes. Yeah. So for our sake here, we can think of it both broadly in matter and in mind. And that is exactly what Atiśa is going to do. He's going to give us first an argument with regard to matter, and then he's going to elaborate a lot on the notion of mind. In regard to this, and then we get to the tip of the hair, material entities are collections of minute particles. When these are closely examined and broken up according to their directional parts, not even the most subtle part remains, and they are completely without appearance. Yeah. Now I thought of looking at it in two ways. On the one hand, the Madhyamaka say, well, now when you keep analyzing, you come to the conclusion very quickly that partless particles don't make much sense, because a partless particle could not touch with other particles. If all particles had no parts, they would have no dimensions at all, and they would all just fall into the same point. They could not produce extension. For an atom to produce the matter as we see it, it must touch something to the left, it must touch something to the right, it must touch something in front and behind and above and below. And that means it must have different sides to it. In other words, it is composed. And that is exactly what you find in physics as well. There's an endless regression in taking particles further apart. When you take that all the way down, I always think of the great Richard Feynman, the greatest physicist, in my opinion, that the United States ever produced. And he says beautifully, in final analysis, he says, I don't know, I can't tell you why particles have characteristics, mass or spin or electrical charge or whatever, apart from the fact that they show these characteristics in relation to other particles. And so he comes very close to a Buddhist understanding. Particles don't have characteristics in and of themselves. These characteristics arise in relationship to something else. A proton is positive only in relationship to an electron. Without an electron, you would not be able to tell. The only way to tell if a proton is positive is by holding an electron next to it, or a magnetic force, and so on and so forth. And so these characteristics arise in relationship to other things. Yeah. And so Atiśa's argument here there is with regard to atomic models, as you see in ancient Greece as well, where they say, well, what is called foundationalism. When I argue why there's a cupboard, at one point, when I keep analyzing, I must find something, some atom that you can't further split apart. And Atiśa says, well, anything that has dimensions and therefore can fill out space must have parts. And so you can take them further apart ad infinitum. So you never find anything. There's always a next level to investigate, and that can't end. What you find is emptiness. And that is in both in parts, in spatial terms, but also in temporal terms. And that is, again, and you can go back to the Feynman diagrams if you ever want to look them up, where Feynman describes how particles progress through time, and where he seems to be in agreement with Buddhists that particles actually don't move through time, they're recreated in every moment. And they can change characteristic, they can become temporary in other particle, and so on and so forth. That is exactly the way they interact with each other. Every moment produces the next moment. And so on the one hand, when we talk about matter, you can say you can endlessly divide it in spatial ways, but also in temporal ways. And the cupboard seems stable to our perception, but when you investigate it deeply, you find something that is extremely transient. And that is why when you move into an Egyptian tomb and you try to take the same cupboard out, it returns to dust, which shows that it was always on its way to become dust. It just doesn't appear to our eyes in that way. Yeah. And so that's where he leaves it. There's many more arguments. The tradition is extremely rich in arguments why matter can't self-exist, but we will have to leave it here for the moment. Does it make a bit of sense? Yeah. And so again, it is not an argument that matter doesn't exist. The Madhyamikas are quite explicit in accepting an external world. But when you talk about any form of matter, from the table to its atoms, the argument is that when you conventionally we can say there is a table, there is an atom, but when you analyze it as with the car, you find only things that are not that atom itself. You find quarks and so on and so forth. Yeah. Yeah. And proton is a name for 3 different quarks. And if we would look deeper, you would find that the quarks are just a name for another group of things, and so on and so on and so on, until it makes no sense anymore. But of course, Madhyamikas are less interested in matter than they are in form. I mean, the liberating power of realizing that tables are empty is definitely there, but we struggle with something that is much more profound, and that is our mind, of who we believe it to be, self. So he continues. Non-material is the mind. Again, there's a few more things, but I am very happy that Atiśa agrees with me to not make it too complicated, so we can keep it right there. In regard to this, the mind has ceased and perished. The mind of the future Oh, I'm not reading the whole sentence, sorry. In regard to this, the past mind has ceased and perished. The mind of the future has not yet arisen or occurred. Before we go on, this is in fact his first argument. So mind again conventionally is there, and I'm in my case doing a hell of a job in making you visible to me and my text. So that is not, again, not what I'm negating. There is obviously mind going around. And there's actually very good arguments why I'm also convinced that you have minds, but we shall not go there. That would be a fantastic topic for next week and next year. Yeah. That does not lead to solipsism. You are not fantasies of my mind. There's easy ways to tell that you must exist as well. But so he says, so mind conventionally exists. When we take it on face value, then we agree. I say, well, there is, I think I have mind because this is clear and knowing. And then as Buddhists, you would say, Gendun, we agree, I have such a thing as well. And then we can have a cup of coffee over that understanding, or in my case, a cup of tea. But then he says, so while that is true, we have this experience that the mind, my mind, pre-exists what it sees. It's as though there's something from this side which is always there, and that thing just sort of independently existing, and then it recognizes other things. And you see that even in our language, it's problematic. Yeah? My mind sees you as though it was there in the first place, and then all of a sudden it recognizes you. Yeah? And then he just points out something that is pretty straightforward. He says, has anyone ever seen the past mind? And the answer is no, the past doesn't exist. And has anyone ever seen the future mind? And the answer is obviously no, no one has ever seen that. But then he argues very convincingly that we have a problem. Because if the moment of mind would have any temporal dimension, some of that dimension would be closer to the future and therefore not happened yet. And some of that would be closer to the past and therefore not have happened or have already happened and disappeared into the past. And so to whatever extent I give mind a sort of temporal depth, I get into problems. He says, in fact, the mind is, in that sense, not findable, because if I try to find it, I always end up with something that either does not exist yet or does not exist anymore. What I perceive as reality at my moment of mind is the meeting, is the point in between. It has no thickness at all. There's nothing here to hold on to. At the present has no thickness. So he says, in that sense, it is not findable. You can't find a moment of mind and hold on to it. There's nothing to find there. You'll always drop either into the future or into the past. It is just the non-dimensional space in between those two, in between not yet existing and no longer existing. Fascinating to think about. And by the way, extremely liberating if you see it. It's the immediate solution to all worries and regrets.
Venerable, there's a question online. Is it the right time or should we wait?
Let's wait for a moment. That's because I would like to. I would really like to finish this text, and I always say I have one enemy in the world, and my enemy is staring at me. And it says, so I try to get as efficiently through this text as humanly possible, and then we'll see if we have time. Yeah. But I think now it is important that we just have a look at this text and hopefully have a taste for it and how valuable it is, how much there is to explore here.
Yeah, I know, but I still have a question.
And so that is the first argument, therefore, that he gives. And then he continues. Even the mind of the present, to the extent that you can speak of that, is extremely difficult to examine. It has no color and is devoid of shape. Since it is similar to space, it is not established. And since it is free of unity and multiplicity, unproduced and having a luminous nature, and so forth. When it is analyzed and examined with a weapon of reasoning, one realizes that it is not established. So to move from the back, what does he mean with established? It means that there is no mind essence. Yeah. Mind, like all phenomena, is a related thing. If I look for it, to find it as existing in and of itself, being able to show it to me without having to rely on some things that is not mind, I can't find it. That is what non-establishment means. And so the mind has no mindness, no mind essence to it. It is something that happens in between other things and is composed. That's where he's going. So first he highlights that when in that definition the mind is clearer knowing, the clearness of it is on the one hand a negative description. And my mind allows me to see the complete plethora of reality. It allows me to see color and shapes and emotions and thoughts and so on and so forth. But if my mind had manifest characteristics, such as form or color, I could not see other forms or other colors. If my mind had the color red, then I would be eternally stuck with that pair of hippie-esque sunglasses, because then everything would appear as shades of red to me. And luckily, my mind does not have as a characteristic that it is red. In fact, it is so transparent that it even can show me transparency. And so he says, when we talk about clear, the mind is devoid of manifest characteristics such that it can show me any characteristic whatsoever. It can show me anything from the red cloth on my table to pleasant feeling to a thought of having to do laundry tomorrow morning and so forth. It can show me all these things because it has none of these characteristics in and of itself. And because of that, it is, one could say, clear, but also luminous. And when you look into this world, we have this idea that the clarity of what we see comes from the world. But even from a neurological perspective, that makes no sense. No, light hits your retina, and after that it is transformed into information, is going through different layers of your visual cortex and so on and so forth. By the time you see anything, it has little to do with light anymore. So the clarity of the image that I see, the light of the light bulbs, the beautiful yellow on the walls and so on and so forth, these are not, I don't see something directly outside. The luminosity of this appearance comes from the side of my mind. Yeah. And so it is exactly because it is empty of manifest characteristics, it can show me anything in this world clearly. And it shows it in such a way that I know it, but that I will leave to the side because that is another fantastic topic for next year. Nina should make a list of all the topics that we're going to discuss next year. When I will then do so much more, so much fun to have. Yeah. And so he says also in that sense, the mind is difficult to find. In a way, we could say when we meditate on the mind, we understand the mind by way of what we see. But it is impossible to see it directly because it has no manifest characteristics. I am aware of the fact that I know. And so in my perception is not only matter, there must be something extra. My knowing is that extra aspect in this experience. So there's matter and there's mind, and these are two sides of what we call experience. Yeah. And then he makes another argument. And again, I must brush over these arguments, where he talks about unity and multiplicity. Yeah. And that's a complex argument. And of the two, because he also uses the word unproduced, and looking at the time we have, I will focus on the unity and multiplicity and leave the produced to the side for a moment. You'll see how far we can get. So what does he mean? He means that And when you keep investigating the mind, when we look deeper than that, do we find that mind, what is mind? Mind is that which knows, therefore. And as the great German physicist Zeilinger says, knowing makes no sense without something known. And vice versa, by the way. And so known and knower are mutually implicated. They inter-exist. There's only knowing when I know of something. Without something known, knowing is an incoherent idea. Even knowing nothing is still knowing something. Think about that. And so, on the one hand, one has to say that knowing always arrives in relationship to something new. And now I know you for a moment. And so a new moment of my mind comes into existence with a new person, in this case, to know. And then I turn my gaze, and all of a sudden there's a new moment of mind that knows something else. So every moment of my awareness is a new moment. The mind equally changes from moment to moment. Always new and fresh. So when I say mind, what I really mean is a whole sequence of moments. That is what produces cognition. And then he argues, if this was self-existing, if my mind was self-existing, if something exists in and of itself, you must be able to say of it that it is either one or that it is many. And he says, well, if you think about it, neither make any sense at all. Because if all these moments were one, then in fact they would always be the same. Then it's just one thing. Then I don't see much at all. Then at the beginning of time, I saw one thing, and I'm still seeing, then in that case, the one thing. You could even argue very pervasively that even that would not be possible. But again, my enemy is watching me. So unity does not make sense. For me to be able to make sense of the world, I must be able to have individual moments. I must allow to contact something and then to understand what I'm actually contacting, and so on and so forth. I need moments to even discern a single phenomena, let alone to be able to discern different things. So is my mind one? No, that does not make any sense. Is that my mind, are all these moments then in and of themselves different? And Atiśa argues here that would not make any sense either, because that they would become entirely disconnected. Because again, remember, to exist dependently or independently are mutually exclusive. They contrast each other. Something depends on something else, or it doesn't. So if this moment of my mind doesn't depend on anything, it means it's also independent of the moment before. But then my awareness will become a complete mess, because nothing of the past would ever contribute to the present. In fact, this moment of my mind is not independent of past moments at all. I can only make sense of what I'm looking at because I learned at one point that this is a table, and this is an iPad, and that is a chair, and so on and so forth. So my mind is neither in and of itself one, nor in and of itself many. All these moments of mind don't exist in and of themselves at all. Does it make a bit of sense? It's tricky, huh? Yeah. So maybe let's go over that argument again and leave the production argument. I will just tell you the production argument in a single phrase, and I will send you home not to sleep this evening. So again, the moment you come to the conclusion, there are individual moments of mind, and that must be. I now know Nina, and now I know iPad, and now I know, and so on and so forth. And so there's different moments of knowing. Knowing is always connected to the known, and evidently, I just labeled 3 moments that knew something quite distinctly. And knowing without known makes no sense. So I just described 3 individual moments. So these moments, how do they exist? Are all these moments of these 3 moments of mind, are they one? If they self-exist, if there's something to be found there, are they one? And the argument is no, because I already described you, I gave you 3 different descriptions. So they're not one. Because if they would be one, the description of each of them would be exactly the same. And that is not the case. Then are they individually different? Do they individually exist without, in and of themselves? And then you would have to say again, no. Because for me to know iPad, I must rely on previous moments of understanding. If you pick my 3-year-old from a while back and you show him that thing, he would not be able to make sense of this thing. It did not even exist at that time. I came to understand it somewhere along those lines. Now, when you take that kid and you show that the car, he would not understand the car either because he doesn't know what cars are. So this moment of my awareness being able to understand car relies on previous moments. But if the mind would exist in and of itself, it should be either one or many. There is no third option. And here we come to the conclusion that neither of these two makes sense. So also in that aspect, you can't find the mind. The mind, any moment of mind it depends on a previous moment of mind of other knowing and a new phenomena that is being known. That is what mind is. In the same way as the car. The car exists, but it exists dependently. Mind exists, but mind exists dependently. So does it start to help? Yeah. And so that is the argument that he keeps trying to give. So when I think about mind, my mind, I can think of my mind independently of anything else. That is the problem. I can think of mind and just turn it around in my mind and it's clearer knowing and so on and so forth. And so I get an appearance of something that I could look at in and of itself. And what we find here, that this makes no sense at all. Mind without object makes no sense. Mind without previous moments of mind makes no sense. And so on and so forth. So when I look for it, I find again other things. And ultimately, and that is, if we would have no concepts at all, we could not even manage, we could not make sense of our experience at all. So the fact that I can know mind requires the concept of mind. So I can only make sense of mind because I'm part of a group of people that agree on the fact that there's mind. And that is what all living beings, luckily for them, agree upon. Yeah. Although that remains to be seen, by the way, but way out of our purview. Yeah. So that gives you, yeah, good. To give you a touch on that produced, he says, when I have an earlier moment of mind and a later moment of mind, moment A produces moment B. There was a moment that I learned about car, and in the long run, that moment of learning about car produces is a condition for me later on being able to recognize a car. So what is the relation between these two moments? And this is here again, you would have to say there's something, then the relationship is a relationship of being same or being different. In other words, something is produced by itself or by other. And he will argue convincingly that does not make any sense again. Because if it is the same, then it pre-existed its own making, which becomes weird. But I can tell you there were schools in India that actually believed that sort of stuff. Yeah. And if they are completely separate, then one is not dependent on the other. So if they were truly other, one could not produce the other, or everything could produce anything at all. But anyway, I can't go into that argument too much. I would say focus on the one and many. That is an easy way to enter into this text. Yeah. Yeah. So what one finds is that it exists, but how does it exist? It is not self-established. It is existing dependently on parts, causes and conditions, and on naming. Yeah, we need concepts to make sense of the world. And so he says, in this way, thank you, in this way, when those two are not established as having any nature at all and do not exist in and of themselves, that should be between brackets. And when the Buddha plays with this word existence, that is what he means. And the way existence appears to us, self-existence. And so that is not possible. In this way, when those two are not established as having any nature at all and do not exist, the very wisdom that individually discriminates is not established either. So even the wisdom that understands two things do not self-exist does not exist in and of itself either. For example, through the condition of firing occurring by rubbing two sticks together, the two sticks are burned up and become non-existent. What this means, in meditation, you start with the appearance that things have. I know iPad, and I start to reason, can I find the iPad? And the iPad appears to me self-existing. That is what I desire when I want one. And when I analyze, we now know you don't find anything. I don't even find the particles of the iPad. The iPad is labeled on parts that are not iPad at all, and on the context in which this thing can perform its function. So I don't find iPad. And on the basis of that, I can then reason the wisdom that realizes that the iPad is unfindable under analysis. And then find that also the wisdom that knows my iPad to be unfindable under analysis also is not findable under analysis. And that is exactly why both exist. The iPad depends for its existence on me understanding it. And on the other hand, me understanding the iPad depends on the existence of an iPad. So iPad and the knower of the iPad exist, but not in and of themselves. When you look for them, you find things that are not that. In this case, when you look for my knower of iPad, you find, amongst other things, an iPad. And iPad is not the knower. And if you look for the iPad, one of the things that you find is the knower. But the knower is not an iPad. And my knower doesn't say in the morning the weather when I ask. My iPad responds. When I say, hey Siri, how's the weather? It's not my mind that says it's 4 degrees. It's my iPad. Yeah. And so what happens, so you analyze, and in both cases, you go beyond. You find the non-findability, and that is what he highlights. So in that awareness, what appears is the, one could say, emptiness or openness of phenomena. You find no essence. And that is what that mind then rests in a non-finding. I looked for an essence, I looked for an awareness and an iPad existing in and of themselves, and I found not that. I found no essence at all. I found an absence of essence. And that is what he labels here by the burning up. So I have normally, maybe I have a mind that I'm upset with because I believe it's not good enough. And at the same time, I'm profoundly desiring my iPad. I'm attached to it. It's mine, not yours. Don't touch it. And then, no, I'm afflicted by these two negative emotions. And then Atiśa says, analyze. What are you angry with? Can you find them? And what you end up with is not finding something. And therefore the basis for both finding myself not to be good enough and finding an iPad to be desirable in and of itself, I don't find. And thereby my aversion with regard to myself and my attachment with regard to my iPad dissipate, because that's what they observe does not exist. Yeah. Just as the very fire that has burned subsides by itself, likewise all specific and generally characterized things are established as non-existent in and of themselves. Wisdom itself, without appearance and luminous, is not established as with any nature at all. The sentence I don't want to explain too deeply. There's two categories. One is a mental phenomena, other is phenomena in the world. And what he wants to say, like under final analysis, you don't find anything existing in and of itself. You thereby find its non-establishment. You find emptiness. Yeah. And that wisdom that does conventionally exist realizes in a luminous way that emptiness, but in it itself does not appear to itself. Only emptiness appears. Luminosity and, as it is beautifully said, luminosity and emptiness are like water in water. Yeah. There's a luminous appearance of emptiness to the mind. All faults, such as laxity and excitement and so forth, are eliminated. Laxity and excitement are two from different long lists of mental hindrances to calm abiding. So he says, and now we have some idea what emptiness is, and we meditate on it. And the force of this object helps overcoming two of the main obstacles that we might experience in meditation. To keep it as simple as possible, to use the words of Alan Wallace, actually, which are quite useful, our minds either do way too much or way too little. When you need to prepare for your exams tomorrow, your mind undoubtedly does way too little. And when you really need a good night of sleep and you're lying in your bed, your mind is doing way too much. And so our mind has difficulty finding a good balance between, in this case, laxity and excitement, between doing too much and too little. And it is calm abiding. The mind becomes calm and resting on an object, and it overcomes both. Yeah. Now, these topics are complex, but here one could say is that the object itself is extremely helpful in overcoming both. That is what he wants to say. It's a powerful antidotal object. In this interval of meditation, consciousness does not conceptualize, nor does it apprehend anything at all. It apprehends emptiness. It apprehends non-findability. And so I had to give you some sense, and I will go a little bit over time if I may. If I can't, then you're free to do whatever you want to do. You would wonder, like, why would I want to know that? Why would I want to abide in emptiness? Because it produces what one could say the bliss of release. We have no idea what the burden is on our shoulders. As on the one hand, this fixed sense of self runs us constantly into trouble. And we feel we all bounce back and forth between pride and not feeling good enough. And that is the price we pay for believing in an I that exists independently of the world. And where I obviously exist, but I happen in between other things. Now, my mind is not self, because if you ever try to meditate, you know that your mind has a life of its own. Your body definitely has it as well. So your parts are not self. And my function not only depends on my parts, but it also depends on my parents to begin with, on my teachers, my friends, and so on and so forth. It depends on this very moment. I happen in between, one could say. Habits with the burden of believing in self-existence of the me is wearisome, and extremely so. It causes all our mental neurosis from depression and so on and so forth. On the other hand, that is the same thing true with the objects of our senses. The fact that we believe them to self-exist makes our mind under the control of aversion and desire. When you look at your awareness, why does it run all the time? Because it is not under your control. Now, if you had full control over your mind and what it observes, calm abiding, concentration would be easy to achieve. Good luck trying. Try to silence your mind for 5 seconds. You will see the limitations to your freedom. And so why do you have limitations to your freedom? Because your mind believes things to exist in and of themselves. And so there's a constant pushing and pulling at your mind. I don't want this. I do want that. And then the mind appropriates that. It makes it into self, like, this is mine. I wanted that. And in that way, we have minds that escape our intent. And that is a burden. And when you look deeply, we always sought freedom of that. And so when you observe the non-findability, the mind relaxes because it's free. Nothing is pulling at it. There's no basis for any neurosis whatsoever. It lets go. And that letting go, see, even Micro Puppy agrees with me. Yeah. Oh, the other dog, okay. Yeah. Habit, what it does is it produces a profound happiness that is based on an absence of a misunderstanding, and that is stable. That is why one would want to realize this. All recollection and mental engagement is eliminated at least as long as you meditate. Consciousness should reside in this way for as long as the enemies or thieves of phenomenal marks and conceptual thoughts do not arise. So you have a pleasant abiding, and especially in the beginning, you think like, oh, this is cool. And the moment you thought this is cool, you were already distracted. It's gone. And so you find truly what all this craving and all this running after thoughts really is. It steals you your peace. And so you let it go. You know what they are. These thoughts are not made by you. They're habitual karmic patterns. And they steal your contentment. So you go back. Then when you wish to rise, when your meditation session is over, slowly release from the cross-legged position and stand up. Then with a mind that sees all things like illusions, do as many virtuous deeds as you are able with body, speech, and mind. Beautiful sentence. And so again, it doesn't mean that things do not exist, but they appear to us in ways that are not true. When you look at a beautiful lake, as this morning, actually with a beautiful moon reflected in that lake, it appears to you as that moon is resting in the lake. But it is not. So the image, the appearance of the moon, of course, exists, and I see it. But it seems to me, to my awareness, as though there is a moon in the lake, and I can guarantee you there's no moon to be found. So the image, the appearance exists and functions, but not in a way it seems to me. And that is what he highlights. Go back into the world, knowing that these things, people exist, but we all suffer from the same delusion. We are like appearances in the lake. But because we don't see it, we do each other and ourselves immeasurable harm. And so he says, let that go, see how things exist. Because as we saw at the beginning, it both provides you with the antidote. This is what you want all beings to see. But it also gives you the confidence that it is possible to care for others. Because whether or not you want it, I am one of your conditions. That means what I do also changes you. And why would I want to do that? Because you change me. If you are here and you are unhappy, then I'm unhappy. I don't function well. But if you are content this evening, then I function better. And so what else is there then to do? To try my best to make you happy. And that is what he says. So see all things as they, that the appearance that you have is illusory. That's not the way they exist. Living beings exist, but they inter-exist. We happen between each other. And that is why we would want to do virtuous deeds. As many as possible, because it makes our mind beautiful. And to do virtuous deeds is happiness. Accordingly, when one practices with devotion and devotion to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, that is why we started with, for a long time and uninterruptedly, then those with good fortune will seek reality in this way, in this very life, and all things will be directly realized effortlessly and spontaneously like the center of space. And what that means in the beginning, we will understand it, but seeing it directly is challenging. So we cultivate. And the more we cultivate, the more we become at ease, the more we facilitate our good and kind heart. And this will be empowering, and we will want to meditate more and more, find more and more freedom, until one day emptiness appears directly to our mind, and we have now seen for ourselves directly the way all things exist, and we will be free. Our mind will be effortless and spontaneous. There's a beautiful sentence actually from one of the Buddha's great disciples, Shariputra, where he's asked, and I like this, it's one of my favorite descriptions from the sutras, where he's asked about what does it feel like to be enlightened? And he says, this is being without a center. Yeah, it's an endless meeting, but with nothing to burden you in the middle. Through the attainment of wisdom after meditation, all things are understood to be illusions, and so forth. From the point, and so here you are what they call an Arya Bodhisattva. No bad deeds can be done anymore, and increasingly you become capable of serving others. From the point of time onward, when the Vajra-like concentration has been realized, Buddhas will not have any subsequent attainment, as they are settled in meditative equipoise at all times. What this means is that as long as we're not Buddhas, we will have to alternate between sitting meditation and working in the world. We cannot bring these two things together. This will end in Buddhahood. Buddhas always are in meditative concentration, even when they are acting for the welfare of all living beings. Yeah. There's much to be said here next year. Yeah. Maybe it's a good topic anyway. Some grounds and paths. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah. Yeah. And so then we are perfected, and then all actions are truly effortless. And Atiśa concludes, I will not speak here regarding the reasonings and scriptures that make statements such as, if it is not like that, what is the difference from bodhisattvas to the power of gathering the accumulations and making aspirations, prayers for countless eons for the welfare of others? Buddhas will become just as those who are taught to be who are to be taught wish them to be. There are many scriptures and reasonings on this topic, but I will not elaborate on them. What that means is that of all the topics in the Dharma, Buddhas are the most complicated. Yeah. If you ever want to reason yourself into a headache, study the mind of a Buddha. It will do that for you delightfully. The thing just to understand, and that is, it's nice to look at it in a simple way. You know, increasingly when you meditate, to give an example that's more accessible to you, when you meditate a lot, you become more and more aware of the fact that the reality is fluid. Especially when you have a deep concentration, you come out, you see the world flowing rather than being. But then, because of our thinking, it hardens into things again. Yeah. And you see yourself unfolding rather than, you know that I am not, I am happening, to say in some clear way. And so in the beginning, there's an enormous chasm between what you see in meditation and what you end up with during the rest of your day. But there will come a point where this sense of fluidity stays with you even outside of meditation. And that is where your sitting session and your out of meditation session start to overlap. That what you have seen directly for yourself then also appears to you off the cushion. Yeah. That is accessible to us, and you can then extend that to the vision of a Buddha. The Buddha knows that we exist, but also that our appearance is illusion-like. He knows we are not intrinsically, but extrinsically established. We are makers of each other. So he says, I don't want to go in all the details. Read a book, and you know now where you can get the books. Write me. Yeah. And then the translator ends it. He says, this text called the Special Instructions on the Middle Way, composed by the Pandita Dīpaṅkara Sri Jnana, is completed. The Indian master himself and the great translator and monk Tsultrim Gyalpa translated it, edited it, and set the final version at the Trunang temple in Lhasa. And so interestingly enough, the text was therefore originally written by Atiśa in Sanskrit, but he participated in the translation of it He actually collaborated with a number of his students in the translating of all these texts. Yeah. And so now you know what he had to say, apart from one thing, production. Yeah. And so, again, what does he do, round it up in a single argument? What is the source of our problem? The source of our problem is that things seem to exist in and of themselves, having essences, or souls, or atmans, or swabhavas, and so on, to self-exist, to be findable in and of themselves. And the Buddha says that is our delusion. That is the aberration in our perception. And that creates all harmful responses of the mind. The mind does its best to serve our needs, but the information it has is wrong. And that is why we feel bad, why we violate ourselves and others, why we find our minds to be out of our control, why it jumps from A to B and moves back and forth between being miserable and desiring and so on and so forth, why it can't be content. And so the Buddha therefore says we need to analyze. And when we analyze, that what we seem to see, we can't find. That is a non-findability. And then when we come out again and we look around, like, so the appearance is back again. How does the appearance happen then? Then the answer is everything depends on parts, everything depends on causes and conditions, and everything depends on imputation by mind. That is the way things exist. And that is a magnificent view, because then we know that we are all interrelated. And my favorite sentence is, my own favorite idea of my own mind is to know oneself to be empty is to know oneself to be full of others. We were never alone. My existence implies the existence of every other living being in this universe. And then you know why you would want to become a Buddha, why you would want to serve all living beings. Because I depend for my existence on all of them. So then what else is there to do but to pursue their well-being? Yeah. I hope that made a bit of sense. It's a deep text. We could talk about this for years. I hope that it gave you some taste of what is in here and why this is important. Yeah. Next year, I'm already thinking about what we're going to do next year, so it's going to be lots of fun. So maybe it's an interesting idea to create the promise, to elaborate a little bit on that, on this next year. We'll create a comprehensive program from all the way from New York to Land of Medicine Buddha in the West Coast. Actually, we'll be looking at Mahamudra. For one thing, we'll use another text of Atiśa where he talks the other way around. He starts off with meditation and then on the basis of meditation analyzes the meditation to be empty. And I will start in New York with a short explanation of the 4 great philosophical Buddhist schools, which is a very good way to get a grasp, sort of a hang on what emptiness is. There's nice steps in it, like first baby steps, then adolescent steps, and then adult steps, and then finally old people steps. Something like this. I'm talking about myself. Don't feel attacked by me. I'm not talking about you. Yeah. And then we can do something in the middle here, for example, to take a good look at what that looks as a path of development. Our tradition is very rich and rewarding in how this psychologically unfolds over time. And what it feels like when we are still accumulating virtue, what it feels like, what happens when we start to play around with an intellectual understanding of emptiness, what really happens when we see things for ourselves, and then how do we train to learn to accomplish the welfare of all beings. That might be a good topic. Something like that. Yeah. Yes? Good.
Yes, online community approves. So do we in the Gompa.
Yeah, good to hear. Yeah. And there's one more thing to say. So I wanted also to give you a bit of a taste of the meditation program that I teach. So we spent 2 evenings last week on Tuesday. We looked a little bit more deeper at why this is necessary from a contemporary perspective. Like, how do we deal with this stuff in a very troubled world? So we finished with like a bit of a shortcut explanation of Madhyamaka philosophy. We did some good meditation in the middle. And that is the content of the in-depth meditation training. At the moment, we are working on compassion, on care for one another, and a beautiful reasoning of how do we cherish all others. But next year, we will go actually very elaborately into Madhyamaka reasons of emptiness. We will go to the source, the great master Nagarjuna, and see all the amazing ways in which he points out that things only exist relatedly, but not in and of themselves. Like, where does our conceptuality go wrong? For example, the relationship between the walker, the walking, and the path on which she is walking. Yeah. Do walkers, walking, and paths exist in and of themselves, or do they only exist together? Yeah. So there's lots to look forward to. If you want to know more, look on the website of this center. You find the training and many other good trainings there. Yeah, there's much to be done here. 1,200 occasions per year. I'm profoundly impressed. So let's dedicate it, yes, on page 11. And then, yeah, instead of the short mandala, we'll do the big mandala, or you will do the big mandala. Oh, there's one thing to add there. You can keep reciting the mandala then as when the mandala is given. So you don't have to stop it. So as long as it takes, you can keep reciting the same thing. May whatever virtue we have collected benefit the teachings and all transmigratory beings. And may it especially cause the essence of perfect pure Losang Drapa's teachings to shine forever. May all sentient beings be graced with the Bodhisattva way of life by the virtue we have obtained, or practiced in the Bodhisattva's path. For our merit, may all those in all directions who are afflicted by bodily and mental sufferings obtain oceans of joy and contentment. As long as the cycle of existence lasts, may their happiness never decline. May the world attain the constant joy of the Bodhisattvas. It is merit of ours, may all beings without exception abstain from every vice and always engage in virtue, not lacking the spirit of awakening, devoted to the Bodhisattva way of life, embraced by the Buddhas and free of the deeds of Maras. May monasteries be well established, full of chanting and study. May there always be harmony among the Sangha, and may the purpose of the Sangha be accomplished. May the Bodhisattva's wishes for the welfare of the world be fulfilled, and whatever the protector's intent for sentient beings, may that be accomplished. May the Pracheka Buddhas and Shravakas be happy, always worshipped by the lofty gods, assurers, and humans. May we live endowed with strength in whatever posture we are. In all our lives, may we find plentiful places of solitude. When we wish to see or ask something, may we see the protector Manyutha himself without any impediment. May our way of life be like that of Manjushri, who lives to accomplish the benefit of all sentient beings throughout the 10 directions. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may we too remain and dispel the miseries of the world.
Thank you, Shela. And we will chant it once in Tibetan, and then we'll go back and chant it in English. Is that okay for you, Shela? Thank you. Wonderful. Okay. Sajipeki Jukshin Metog Tramrirablingi Nidegyen Padi Sangye Jingdu Mikte Ulwai Droku nam dak jing la Trupa shung Jetsun lame kutserapten Ching nam katrin le chok chuk ye padang Losang tenpei drun me sa sumgi Rowei mun sel taktuEgyur chig. So we chant in English. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. May my Venerable Lama's life be firm, his wide divine actions spread in the 10 directions. May the torch of the teachings of Losang always remain, dispelling the darkness of all beings in the 3 realms. I guess we'll do one more time in Tibetan. Sajipuki Jukshin Metog Tramri Rablingji Nidegen Padi Sangye Jingdu Mikte Ulwayi Roku Nam Dagjin La Chupashog Jetsun Lame Kutserapten Ching Nam Katrin Le Chok Chuk Ye Padang Losang Tenpei Drun Me Sa Sumgi Draway moon sel taktuEgyur chig idam guru ratna mandalakam niryatayami.
Incomparable kindness, supreme cleansing Yasu, the wish granting, wish fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. May you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Save the land of Snow's teachings and transmigratory beings, who extensively clarifies the path that unifies emptiness and compassion. To the lotus holder Tenzin Gyatso we beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. In the land that is circled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pracheka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you we make request. while striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace with a great loss. Nevertheless, to the undeceiving truth are the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels, and the great ways of Bodhicitta are the children of the victorious ones. May the smile of reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples, one onwards. Due to this virtue, may we quickly become Guru Buddhas and lead all transmigratory beings without exception to that state. May the precious view of emptiness not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. Due to all the past, present, and future merits collected by us, the numberless Buddhas and numberless sentient beings, which are completely empty of existing from their own side, may we, who are completely empty of existing from our own side, achieve a state of full enlightenment, which is completely empty of existing from its own side, and lead all sentient beings who are completely empty of existing from their own side to that state which is completely empty of existing from its own side, we ourselves alone who are completely empty of existing from our own side. We fully dedicate all these virtues to be able to train just like the hero Manjushri, who knows reality, and just like Samantrabhadra as well. We fully dedicate all our roots of virtue with dedication praised as the best. By all the gone beyond victorious ones, 3 times in order to have good conduct. For the Dharma kings Tsongkhapa's way of Dharma to flourish, may all signs of obstacles be pacified and all conducive conditions be complete. Due to the 2 times of merits of the 3 times of ourselves and others, may the teachings of the victorious one Losang shine resplendent forever.
Sheila, may we go back to the long life prayer, please, for Venerable Gendun? If we may, Venerable, if you allow us, please. Since we need you back here.
Thank you so much, Venerable. That was so completely brilliant.
You who show all precious vehicles, working tirelessly for all those lost in samsara, teachings pouring straight from heart's experience, may we walk the paths together till what needs to be done is done. Thanks, Sheila.
And so I would like to express my gratitude to you. It's the first time here in New Mexico. You made me feel very welcome. Life could not have been easier. I have come to meet a very warm, caring community. I heard marvelous things like, for example, how you clean and make proper. Oh, I see that I heard. Anyway, I heard great things about how you run this center together. Yeah. And so from the bottom of my heart, it was a joy to meet all of you in the last week, this evening, this weekend, and practice together. I'm also very appreciative. I had no idea that you did so many things. Again, 1,200 occasions per year is a lot. That you managed to do that is amazing. And you saw that in the prayers I exchanged in all the prayers that we have done, the word I for we. It is not to be underestimated how important it is to practice and serve together. As Westerners, we would like to sit on a cushion and achieve our own individual enlightenment. And I can tell you that is probably not possible. That is hard to do. Only when, and that this tradition emphasizes so much, is that it is only by preparing our mind. And of course, preparing our mind means studying the Lamrim and practicing the Lamrim and making mandala offerings and Guru Yoga and so on and so forth. But it also means serving each other. You can only go on your own to a cave or to a forest to meditate when you can take your community with you. Otherwise, the burden of self I can guarantee you is way too much. Others alleviate you from that burden. So to see here a center in which you work so hard to keep the Dharma alive in a time when it is so necessary, has my deep appreciation and my gratitude. In the end, this weekend we talked a lot about the daughters of emptiness, and I'm very grateful to see there's also sons of emptiness at the same time. And then I highlighted, there was a story about the Chinese nuns in equally ravaging, difficult situations as we find them today. And that purpose was over 2,000 years to keep the gates to nirvana open. And so to find each other here together, keeping the path to freedom open is amazing. And it's not to be undervalued. So may you find that as a richness in your mind, may it be the pathway also for your own freedom. And please hurry up.
Venerable, it was an incredible, rich week. A lot of fun, a lot of togetherness. And thank you again for putting a mirror up and showing us the value and the preciousness of the community we have here. I always marvel and always get energized by being here because of the 1,000 hugs and being surrounded by love everywhere I turn. And I hope that you felt it too. And I hope you're energized by being with us. Thank you so much for sharing the precious Dharma teaching, for inspiring us to meditate more, to care more for others, and also for stirring our minds a little bit up today, especially this evening. I feel like it's, sometimes they say it's so great to leave the cushion wanting more, and I feel like you're leaving Santa Fe with us wanting more of the teachings. The plan is great, and in the meantime, please travel safely, benefit others, benefit the whole world like you did here. I know that you have a very full schedule in the next coming months, and when the time comes, we will be here waiting for you, Venerable, and we are really hoping it will come fast. So thank you so much, so much gratitude. And for those who would like to, I know that there were some requests for a short kata offering. For those who didn't have a chance to offer a kata and would like to do that, feel free to follow me. Thank you so much. Thank you, Venerable, and thank you all for being here.